if you harbor the belief that the ultimate underdog narrative, the classic tale of an absolute nobody rising to unparalleled supremacy, is merely a modern trope, engineered for sensationalist fiction, it is entirely possible you have yet to encounter this, the most staggering life story in human history. Take a moment to close your eyes and visualize this, an absolutely harrowing start to life. You are born into a suffocating, brutally rigid caste system, right in the middle of an ancient slave society. Your beginning in this world is not among the aristocracy or the privileged elite, rather, you are condemned entirely, the absolute lowest stratum of humanity, entirely deprived of even the most fundamental personal freedoms. As if this horrific start were not enough for you, during your infancy, your homeland is devastated by catastrophic floods. A desperate bid for your survival, your mother places you right into a broken, makeshift wooden basin, allowing you to narrowly escape the raging waters, before you are ultimately and heartlessly abandoned within the hollow trunk of a massive mulberry tree. As you grow into adulthood, your designated profession is that of a lowly cook, perpetually trapped, stuck in a suffocating kitchen, endlessly tossing pans, while being relentlessly choked by grease, smoke, and fire. As your life progresses, you are not even afforded this, the basic dignity of being recognized as a human being. Instead, you are treated entirely as property packaged away, as a mere dowry item when the master's daughter marries, shipped away to a foreign household like mundane cargo. If you were dealt this seemingly insurmountable, atrocious hand, it would be entirely reasonable to assume this, that your fate was permanently sealed from the start, prompting you to simply surrender to your miserable destiny. Yet, the individual who actually lived this harrowing reality, a man subjugated to the absolute rock bottom of society, he ultimately orchestrated some of the most earth-shattering achievements, the most monumental achievements ever recorded in history. This is a man who personally masterminded the total overthrow of an immensely powerful and firmly entrenched dynasty that had ruled with an iron fist for 4 centuries. From the ashes of that fallen regime, he architected an entirely new and completely sprawling empire. He not only ascended to become the first true prime minister in Chinese history, but he also executed political maneuvers so unimaginably bold, maneuvers so bold that they completely defy belief. Following the death of the founding monarch, he found him, the newly anointed king, was unbearably incompetent and tyrannical. In response, he simply mobilized the military forces, the forces under his command, and summarily exiled him. He just exiled the reigning son of heaven. Astonishingly, after forcefully banishing the sovereign, he was never condemned by future generations as a treacherous usurper, or as some kind of chaotic rebel. Instead, he was fiercely venerated and worshipped by legendary sages. Sages such as Confucius and Mencius forever immortalized him. He was immortalized as the ultimate teacher of emperors. Even more remarkably, to this very day, the culinary profession, across the nation, they still revere him as undisputed, their unshakable patron saint and founding patriarch. He is the most fiercely legendary, unapologetically audacious figure, and breathtakingly multifaceted figure in all of Chinese history, the absolutely extraordinary man known as Yin Tode. We will unravel the magnificent, stormy tapestry of the monumental transition between the Xia and Shang dynasties, diving deeply into the life of this paramount Chinese statesman. We will witness exactly how a despised, enslaved chef utilized nothing more than a giant cooking wok to brew up a paradigm-shifting, epoch-defining revolution. A revolution that would shake the foundations of eternity. To truly understand this formidable titan, we must first examine his true origins. His given name was actually Zhe Yin was not it. It was not his birth name, but an exalted title. The exalted official title he would eventually hold. A position roughly equivalent to the right prime minister. The right prime minister of later eras. He lived through a period of immense, cataclysmic turbulence during the late stages of the Xia dynasty and the very dawn of the Shang dynasty, according to the ancient historical text Lushi Chunchu. Yi Yin was born in a place known as Kongsang, after miraculously surviving the torrential floods in his wooden basin. The orphaned infant was discovered and formally adopted by the ruler of the state of Xin. It is crucial to note that despite his inescapable legal status as a mere slave, Yi Yin possessed an intellect of terrifying brilliance. He was not only a master of elevated culinary arts, capable of transforming basic ingredients into exquisite delicacies, but his true genius lay in his boundless strategic vision. While his peers stared mindlessly at the kitchen flames, solely focused on adding firewood to the stoves, Yi Yin utilized every spare moment amidst the smoke to silently and rigorously analyze the shifting geopolitical currents. The shifting geopolitical currents of the world. He obsessively studied the profound statecraft and governance philosophies, the philosophies of the ancient sage kings. During this agonizing period, Yi Yin was a man whose physical body was rigidly imprisoned within the cramped walls, the oppressive walls of a kitchen, yet whose magnificent mind operated as a top-tier grand strategist, relentlessly running complex simulations of the global chessboard. If one were forced to summarize the entirety of Yi Yin's sweeping lifetime in a single phrase, it would be reshaping the heavens and the earth. Any single one of his primary historical exploits, pulled entirely at random, stands out as a groundbreaking first, capable of completely illuminating the historical record. During his early years, the world was still under the absolute dominion of the Xia dynasty. However, the final monarch of this era, Xia Jie, was a man consumed by unprecedented cruelty and sadism. The suffering masses of the empire had endured the brutal yoke of Xia for far too long, and they desperately prayed for a monumental upheaval. It was during this volatile climate that Yi Yin found himself residing within the Shang tribe, which was led by a chieftain named Shang Tang. Shang Tang was absolutely no ordinary warlord, was an exceptionally ambitious, extraordinarily capable leader, who concurrently harbored a deep, genuine compassion for the people. Shang Tang had long been acutely aware of the legendary wisdom possessed by this enslaved chef. Driven by a desperate thirst for top-tier talent, Shang Tang completely disregarded the rigid class barriers of the era. He dispatched lavish diplomatic missions bearing heavy treasures to invite Yi Yin to join his cause, not once, but on 5 separate occasions. This astonishing historical event, known as the 5 Solicitations, occurred over a millennium before Liu Bei's famous 3 visits to the thatched cottage. During the 3 kingdoms, serving as a profound testament to Shang Tang's his desperate yearning for absolute brilliance, sheer, unadulterated value of Yi Yin's intellect. On Se Yin finally accepted the mantle of chief advisor, a conventional strategist would have immediately advised the chieftain to conscript soldiers, hoard supplies, and launch an immediate and very bloody rebellion. Yi Yin, however, opted against such predictable brute force. Instead, he executed a profoundly shocking and dangerous maneuver. He personally infiltrated the heavily fortified the capital of the Xia dynasty to operate as a high-level, undercover spy, deep within the lethal, treacherous heart of enemy territory. Yi Yin flawlessly weaponized his piercing intellect. He smoothly navigated his way into the most intimate circles, the inner circles of Xia's central authority, systematically uncovering every hidden detail regarding military deployments and the boiling, widespread resentment among the domestic populace. Pushing his covert operations to the absolute limit, he even successfully manipulated and turned Mo Shi, the most beloved and influential concubine, at Xia Jie's side. Having completely secured the most heavily guarded, top-secret intelligence, the absolute top-secret intelligence of the Xia regime, Yi Yin miraculously slipped out of the capital and returned to Shang Tang's side without a single scratch. Upon his return from this legendary espionage mission, the critical question remained: how should they initiate the war? To flawlessly gauge the remaining strength and absolute bottom line, the bottom line of the decaying Xia Empire, Yi Yin formulated a brilliantly sinister strategy. He advised Shang Tang to abruptly halt all mandatory tribute, to halt all payments to the Xia throne. This audacious act predictably struck a devastating nerve. Xia Jie erupted into an uncontrollable, towering rage and immediately mobilized the colossal, combined military forces, the forces of the 9 Yi tribes, intending to violently eradicate Shang Tang, eradicate him from the face of the earth. Observing this massive troop movement from the shadows, Yi Yin remained chillingly calm, issuing a countermand to his lord. He noted that since Xia Jie still retained political capital, he could still command the various allied warlords. The Xia dynasty, though rotting, still possessed a lethal sting. Advised Shang Tang that they were not strong enough, not nearly strong enough, win an open conflict, and instructed him to immediately issue a groveling apology and pay the demanded protection money, placing absolute unwavering trust in his advisor. Shang Tang immediately bowed his head, apologized profusely, and quietly resumed paying the mandatory tribute. A tense year passed. In waiting, with eagle-eyed precision, Yi Yin recognized the shifting tides and ordered Shang Tang to cut off the tribute payments once more. This time, when the furious Xia Jie violently demanded this, that his vassals assemble for a punitive expedition, an incredible miracle finally unfolded before them. Powerful warlords of the 9 Yi tribes universally ignored it. They universally ignored his imperial summons. Not a single allied leader answered the tyrant's call. His call to arms was completely ignored. A brilliant gleam flashed in Yi Yin's eyes as he slammed his hand against the table, rendering his verdict. Absolutely perfect moment had arrived. Xia Jie had entirely alienated his allies, and he stood utterly alone. The time to strike was now. This grand orchestration culminated in the historically monumental Battle of Mingtiao, under Yi Yin's god-like strategic planning and his completely flawless battlefield command. The Shang forces descended upon the enemy like a wrathful celestial army descending from the heavens, utterly obliterating the Xia military in a single, decisive confrontation. The once invincible tyrant Xia Jie was pathetically exiled, and the colossal Xia dynasty, dominating for 400 years, was violently and permanently erased from existence. The triumphant establishment of the Shang dynasty, the indispensable architect of the victory, Yi Yin, was officially appointed as the Yin, the supreme prime minister of the land. Wielding unparalleled authority, he did not merely assist Shang Tang in meticulously drafting the foundational laws and institutional frameworks, the frameworks of the entirely new state. He also authored the deeply influential historical document, the document known as the Tongxue, effectively cementing the absolute legal and moral legitimacy of the Shang dynasty's right to rule. Furthermore, having risen from the brutal lower depths of society, Yi Yin placed an immense unrelenting focus on the socio-economic welfare of the common peasantry. He fiercely purged political corruption, instituted an uncompromising standard, a merit-based standard of employing officials that would deeply influence Chinese administrative philosophy for thousands of years to come, thanks to his tireless, brilliant stewardship. Early years of the Shang dynasty enjoyed crystal clear integrity. Crystal clear political integrity and explosive economic prosperity, rapidly solidifying its unshakable dominance over the Central Plains. It is staggering to comprehend that an insignificant slave not only violently shattered an ancient, decaying world, but also flawlessly engineered a vibrant, thriving new one. Yet, remarkably, this does not even represent the zenith, the true zenith of Yi Yin's spectacular life, the true events that permanently elevated him from a brilliant statesman to an immortal, revered sage, occurred during the absolute apex of his power, revealing a depth of wisdom and raw courage, totally unmatched in human history. To grasp his true magnitude, we must examine this, two highly definitive anecdotes from his life. The first demonstrates his supreme intellectual wisdom, while the second perfectly encapsulates his unparalleled, unassailable virtue. The first legendary account is this philosophical doctrine: governing a large state is like cooking a small fish. As previously established, Yi Yin initially arrived in Shang Tang's camp. He arrived there as a severely marginalized dowry slave. For a laborer of such abysmally low status, securing an audience with a powerful tribal chieftain was nearly impossible. So, how did he successfully market his vast hidden brilliance? Yi Yin cunningly leveraged the only tool at his disposal, his unparalleled mastery of the culinary arts. Onse Yin meticulously prepared a rich pot of meat stew for Shang Tang. Taking a sip, the chieftain immediately frowned. He complained that the broth was far too salty. Undeterred, Yi Yin presented a second pot the following day. Shang Tang tasted it and shook his head, noting that the broth was now terribly bland. Third day, a final pot of stew was served. As Shang Tang suspiciously took a spoonful, his eyes widened in sheer astonishment. The flavor was absolutely spectacular, a flawless, divine balance of taste. Overjoyed, Shang Tang heaped praise upon the meal. He immediately ordered the kitchen servant to be brought before him. When he finally stood before the powerful lord, he merely offered a fuckface, calm smile. He completely ignored the opportunity to flatter his master or to boast about his kitchen skills. Instead, he unleashed a philosophical masterclass that would stun the ancient world. An expansive theory of political governance seamlessly intertwined with culinary theory, with profound dignity. He informed the chieftain of something. The delicate principles of cooking were exactly identical to governing a nation. He explained that supreme cuisine demands the precise harmonization of the 5 flavors. Too much salt ruins it with harshness, while too much water destroys it with blandness. Only when the balance is immaculate and the heat perfectly controlled can a master chef produce a truly legendary dish. He fervently argued that managing a vast empire is fundamentally no different. If a state's punitive laws are excessively draconian, the suffocated populace will inevitably rise in bloody rebellion. Conversely, if the laws are dangerously lax, malicious actors will run rampant and completely destroy society. Therefore, a true sovereign must blend deep compassion with ironclad, terrifying authority. Much like a master chef managing the violent heat of a roaring fire, a ruler must perfectly balance leniency with severity to genuinely capture the hearts of the entire world. Shang Tang was left completely speechless, deeply humbled by the sheer magnitude of the slave's intellect. Right then and there, he officially abolished Yi Yin's slave status and shattered all historical precedent by elevating him directly to the supreme position of right prime minister. This momentous exchange is forever immortalized in history as advising Tang through the cooking pot. Centuries later, the great philosopher Lao Tzu penned his immortal Tao Te Ching and wrote the legendary phrase about governing a large state, channeling the profound inspiration originating from Yi Yin. Due to this incredible journey, Yi Yin was permanently enshrined as the supreme ancestor of cooking by all subsequent generations of Chinese culinary professionals. Utilizing a bowl of soup to articulate grand political strategy, showcased his breathtaking intellect, but the subsequent chapter of his life represented the ultimate terrifying crucible of human morality and power dynamics. This brings us to the astonishing historical event. The event, known as Yi Yin exiles Taijia, a mere few years after officially founding the Shang dynasty, the great sovereign Shang Tang finally passed away. Years witnessed a highly unstable royal succession, plagued by the premature deaths of several short-lived monarchs. Eventually, the supreme authority of the throne fell into the lap of Shang Tang's young grandson, Taijia. Taijia proved to be an absolute disaster. He was the quintessential, highly entitled second-generation aristocrat the moment he secured the crown, ruthlessly discarded every single law, every moral guideline and institutional boundary established by his grandfather. He plunged into a lifestyle of chaotic debauchery and endless gluttony, giving himself over to unchecked hedonism. Worse still, he sadistically oppressed the common people, single-handedly, transforming a previously stable, prosperous royal court into a horrific nightmare of misery and corruption. By this critical juncture, Yi Yin was an untouchable, fiercely respected elder statesman, a man who had served 3 successive monarchs. He stood at the absolute zenith of the political hierarchy, wielding power capable of blotting out the sun. Confronted with a seemingly irredeemable and destructive royal heir, Yi Yin initially adhered to his duties as a loyal subordinate, exhausting himself with endless, desperate verbal admonitions. He poured his heart and soul into drafting 3 major political treatises, the Yi Shun, the Si Ming, and the Si Yu Hao, desperately hoping to educate and reform the young king by reminding him of his grandfather's glorious, hard-fought legacy. Tragically, deeply intoxicated by his absolute imperial power, Xia Jie arrogantly refused to even glance at the documents, continuing his reign of terror and reckless abandon without a second thought. At this terrifying crossroads, it appeared the Prime Minister had only 2 viable options: either play it safe, protect his own life, and helplessly watch Shang Tang's painstakingly built empire burn to ash, or simply assassinate the useless tyrant and seize the imperial throne for himself. However, defying all human expectation and historical precedent, Yi Yin executed a terrifying, awe-inspiring third option. He forcefully exiled the reigning monarch. In only the 3rd year of Xia Jie's disastrous administration, Yi Yin boldly mobilized the immense military forces at his disposal. He physically apprehended the supposedly untouchable, divinely appointed sovereign, and forcibly deported him to Tonggong, the sacred site of his grandfather Shang Tang's tomb. There, Yi Yin commanded the deposed king to serve as a lowly gravekeeper. Pointing directly at the disgraced monarch's face, Yi Yin issued a stern, terrifying ultimatum. Xia Jie was to remain in isolation, deeply reflecting on his sins, and was forbidden to return until he truly understood this, the immense burden of being a worthy king, to physically banish the Son of Heaven in an ancient world, a world that fundamentally operated on the strict doctrine of divine right, where subjects were expected to gladly accept death if the king demanded it. This was legally considered the ultimate act of treason, a horrific crime traditionally punishable by the total extermination of your extended family. Yet, during the agonizing 3 years of Xia Jie's banishment, Yi Yin utterly defied the cynical expectations of the world. A world that was just waiting for a violent usurpation. Assuming the title of Prince Regent, he temporarily shouldered the gargantuan burden of the state. He gracefully received the tributes of the vassal lords, and poured his boundless energy into governing the empire, maintaining a state of flawless order, prosperity, and explosive growth. Meanwhile, trapped in the desolate confines of Tonggong, forced to consume meager rations while staring at the silent, looming tomb, staring at the tomb of his legendary grandfather, Xia Jie underwent a profound psychological transformation, crushed by the heavy, silent legacy of Shang Tang. The relentless, patient, educational efforts of Yi Yin. The young man genuinely broke down and repented. He deeply internalized his horrific mistakes, dedicated himself to cultivating true virtue and moral clarity. 3 years later, having verified that his moral reformation was genuine, Yi Yin displayed an almost terrifying lack of greed, without a shred of hesitation or reluctance. He personally led the entire royal court and military leadership to Tonggong, respectfully escorting the rehabilitated king back to the capital. Furthermore, Yi Yin completely and peacefully surrendered every ounce of absolute power, surrendering that world-shaking power back to Xia Jie, willingly stepping down into the shadows of his ministerial role. Upon reclaiming the throne, Xia Jie operated as a completely reborn individual. He became an incredibly diligent, fiercely compassionate ruler, a ruler who strictly upheld the rule of law, Ultimately, he evolved into a brilliant, beloved sovereign, deeply cherished by the populace and respectfully granted an exalted posthumous temple name, the name of Zhongzong, by later generations. It was precisely this breathtaking sequence of events, possessing the terrifying courage to forcefully depose a king for the ultimate survival of the nation, combined with the superhuman moral fortitude to completely relinquish absolute power, to relinquish it when the crisis was finally averted, that permanently cemented Yi Yin's status as a transcendent deity, a deity immortalized in the annals of history. If you survey the sprawling, bloody continuum of human history, there is certainly no shortage of immensely powerful officials, figures such as the Han dynasty's Wang Mang, the Three Kingdoms' Cao Cao, and the Wei State's Sima Yi. They all seized absolute control, their influence temporarily eclipsing the heavens. Yet, when placed before the blinding, intoxicating temptation of the ultimate imperial throne, every single one of them suffered a catastrophic moral collapse, inevitably plunging down the dark, bloody path of violent usurpation and dynasty. Ending rebellion, Yi Yin stands completely alone. He possessed the most immaculate, foolproof conditions for a successful usurpation: a deeply incompetent ruler, and total control over the military, world-shattering personal prestige, and the absolute loyalty of the entire empire. Had he merely spoken the word, the eternal crown was his to take. Instead, he utilized the most brutal, dictatorial methods to execute the most profoundly loyal and faithful act of education imaginable. He banished Taijia not to quench a dark personal thirst for supremacy, but to desperately protect the hard-won legacy of his beloved master, Shang Tang, by willingly restoring Taijia to power. Prove this to the universe. Prove through undeniable action that his heart was exclusively occupied by the survival and prosperity of the common people, entirely devoid of selfish ambition. Centuries later, the illustrious second sage Mencius would evaluate Yi Yin's character. He evaluated him with overwhelming, tearful reverence. Mencius noted that Yi Yin was a man who aggressively stepped forward to serve, both when the empire was enjoying golden eras of peace and when the world was drowning in apocalyptic chaos. Mencius concluded that Yi Yin believed this down to the very marrow of his bones, that he was born with a heavy, divinely mandated obligation. He felt an uncompromising duty to forcibly hoist the collective destiny of humanity, to hoist it directly onto his own shoulders in the year 1549 BC, after living for over a century and serving a staggering 5 generations of Shang kings. Great Yi Yin finally passed from this world, the 4th monarch of the dynasty, King Wo Ding. Driven by an overwhelming sense of profound gratitude, he shattered all royal protocols. He buried this former slave who had become the eternal prime minister, with the breathtaking, grandiose honors strictly reserved for the Son of Heaven. Even more spectacularly, Wo Ding elevated Yi Yin into the sacred Shang ancestral temple, permanently enshrining him alongside the mighty, divine kings of the dynasty, ensuring that this former cook would forever receive the sacred incense and the worship of all future royal generations. From a pitiable, drowning infant, abandoned in a wooden basin, to an abused culinary slave traded as a humiliating dowry item, from a daring, invisible spy operating behind enemy lines, to the supreme architect of a 600-year dynastic empire, and the undisputed greatest statesman in Chinese history, Yi Yin utilized his utterly unfathomable, seemingly impossible life, hammer home a vital, unyielding truth for all subsequent generations. Heroism never ever asks about your origins. Authentic greatness is absolutely not defined by the sheer height of the political peak, the peak you manage to conquer, nor the terrifying vastness of the power you hoard. True greatness is defined by your ability, upon reaching the zenith of human authority and possessing the entire world, to violently crush the endless, dark desires of your own human heart, fiercely maintaining the pure, unbroken faith and morality that you held at the beginning. If you currently find yourself languishing in the darkest, most oppressive valleys of life, utterly convinced that you have been dealt a hopelessly catastrophic hand, and feeling completely suffocated by the crushing weight of reality. I urge you to pause and think about the man who, thousands of years ago, stood trapped in a filthy, blazing kitchen, physically tossing cooking pans, while his brilliant mind was silently, flawlessly plotting the total domination of the known world. The dreadful cards that fate violently throws your way are ultimately irrelevant. The only thing that truly matters is exactly how you plan to play that wretched hand, to execute an earth-shattering counterattack. Paradigm-breaking counterattack against the storm.